Good afternoon, everybody. Bill Kennard here with Grandy and Associates. Hey, wanted to give you a quick update on the Payroll Protection Program forgiveness application. If you're receiving this email, it's because you watched one of the webinars or attended one of the webinars that we've held on the Payroll Protection Program here over the last 2 months. About 2 weeks ago, roughly June 4th, I believe, President Trump signed into law the Payroll Protection Program Flexibility Act of 2020. And that basically changed some of the parameters of the Payroll Protection Program forgiveness side that we've been working under. Also, in addition to that, the day before yesterday, the SBA issued 2 new applications for this program, for the forgiveness side of this program. And so I wanted to just take a couple of minutes and update you on the things that have changed in the applications themselves. Again, on our website, grandyassociates.com/untangle, we've got links on there now for the new applications as well as the instruction sheets for them. So let's first talk about some of those differences. Number one, as I said, there's 2 different applications that they have. The first one, if you remember, the original was 11 pages long. Right? And I said that all you had to fill out was 4 pages of it, really. Well, that still applies. The new application, what they've done is it's only 5 pages. They, in effect, pulled out all the instructions. And so that's why on our website, I've got the link not only to the 5-page, the updated application, but then also to the instruction packet that goes along with it. So it's still the same base application that I went over in my last webinar. But we've got some updates to that one. And again, we say 5 pages. The last page on both applications is purely demographics. It's optional. You don't have to fill it out. I'm not even covering it. The second application that they came out with was for Form 3508EZ. It's a simplified application form. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the differences on the full application form because that applies to everybody. The simplified application form will only apply to some of you. And so we'll talk about some of those differences here coming up in just a couple of minutes. So on the application itself, if you remember the full application, we talked about the best way to fill that one out is start at the back of it and move to the front. And so same thing here as we talk about some of the differences. Back on Worksheet A, Table 2, page 4, right? This was the 2 tables that we had on there. You listed all the employees in Table 1 who earned less than $100,000 per year. And Table 2 was designed for all employees earning more than $100,000 per year. Now, one quick note as an update here, there's been some clarification on this. The owner of the company should not be either on Table 1 or on Table 2. Even if you take some of your compensation out of the company in the form of wages. Right? If you get a paycheck along with everybody else in payroll, again, you still don't include yourself in here. You will be on Worksheet A, line 9 for everything. I'll talk about that in 1 minute. This will be just the employees who are, the rest of the team members that we have. So again, specifically with Table 2, employees earning more than $100,000 per year, we're going to fill that out just like we talked about last time. Again, the employee name, the employee identifier is simply the last 4 digits of their Social Security number, and then cash compensation. Now, that's the area where we have a little bit of a change, and it's only this, right? One of the other items that played a part in the Flexibility Act that was signed in place a couple of weeks ago now said that instead of having all your funds have to be spent in 8 weeks, we can now go out to 24 weeks. Well, that changes a couple of items, right? One of those is this cash compensation, right? So again, if an employee made $100,000 per year, that means that over an 8-week period, they would earn $15,384. With this new guideline that's here now, you have your choice. If you received your payroll funds, your payroll protection funds, June 4th or earlier, you have a choice of whether you want to still work under the 8-week period or whether you want to work under the 24-week period. It's your choice. You can do either. If you receive your funds June 5th or later, you don't have a choice. Then you're under the 24-week program. All right, so at that point, if you're under the 8-week program, again, you're still at the $15,384. If you are opting to go with the 24-week period, now that same employee, the maximum amount is $46,154. And if you do the math on that and you annualize it over the 52 weeks of the year, it's the same pay rate. They both equal out to $100,000 per year. You just have a longer time period, so the maximum amount that you can put in is those levels. So that's the first change. Again, you're still going to tally them up. Remember that, again, you're just, once you get to that point, just looking at the tallies, the totals in these boxes 4 and box 5. So that was the first change that was made. The second change that was made was to Worksheet A itself. This is page 3 in the new application. So on this one, if you remember the whole first top half, we're basically pulling information from tables 1 and table 2 and bringing them forward. Line 9 is where we have a change. Line 9 is the owner's compensation. Now, there's a couple of different elements here that are really important for you to be aware of. Number one, again, if you remember that as the owner, if you earn more than $100,000 per year, you were limited to that same $15,384. If you opt as a company to go with the 24-week period, now that has changed slightly. Now they allow you to max out at $20,833. And part of the reason for that is because the assumption is being made that, look, you're the owner of the company. You were there the whole time period anyway. And so you're still earning something. As a result, again, they only give you 10 weeks worth of pay out of that. Your original loan was geared around 10 weeks worth of pay. Right? If you remember your average monthly payroll from last year times a factor of 2.5, so in effect that's 10 weeks worth of payroll that you could borrow. They're only, as the owner, going to let you take out a maximum of 10 weeks of that dollar amount. There's another caveat that they added that's really important. They've added some verbiage to the instructions, and let me read these 2 lines because they're kind of important. It says, for borrowers, for example, using a 8-week covered period, this amount is capped at $15,385, right? The equivalent of $100,000 for each individual, or the 8-week equivalent of their applicable compensation for 2019, whichever is lower. Those 3 words, whichever is lower, are really critically important. And what they're saying is they're not going to allow you to increase your wage as the owner of the company simply because we've got these funds available and we can write them off. Right? They're going to cap you out at what you paid yourself last year. That's what your loan amount was geared around. In effect, they're saying we don't want you as the owner of the company to increase your wages, and the employees themselves are in effect going to be penalized. Right? And as an average, we show that we still paid the same amount in payroll. They want to avoid that piece of the puzzle. So that's kind of an important fact to remember, right? So again, this number is going to be capped out at a maximum of $20,833 for the owner, or whatever you paid yourself last year for the same period, whichever is lower. So in other words, you can't take an increase over last year. The other items that are in there, again, is remember that, again, you don't list yourself on Table 1 or Table 2 that we just covered. And if there's multiple owners, again, attach a separate worksheet to the application showing the detail for each individual owner of the company. So that's the second change that's in there. It's kind of a big one. Third one is on the forgiveness calculation form itself, page 1 of the application. Now, all the stuff in the top half of it is pretty much the same, right? We fill in our information, the SBA loan number, the bank's loan numbers. None of this changed from what we talked about in the previous webinar, right? That's all still there. The covered period, because of this 8-week, 24-week thing, does change slightly. Again, that covered period will always start the same day the funds hit your account. But now, again, you have the option. If you received your funds June 4th or earlier, you have the option to choose whether you want an 8-week period or a 24-week period. And so, again, the 8-week period is simply going to be the day the funds hit your account plus 56 days to come up with the total. If you're following a 24-week period, it's going to be the day the funds hit your account plus a 168-day period. Right, so that's your covered period at that point in time. Second thing is, again, the alternative payroll covered period, again, is at your discretion. You don't have to use it. That would be, again, if your payroll period hits a different period, a different time frame than your covered period. Let's say you received your funds on, on Monday, and your next payroll period doesn't start until next Friday. Okay, you could use an alternate payroll period for that. It just makes some of the reporting a little bit easier because now I can just run payroll reports for that period. Again, it's your choice as to whether you do that, but as the owner, you can choose, as long as you received your funds June 4th and earlier, you can choose whether you want to go with the 8-week period or the 24-week period, and again, use the one that benefits you the most. You don't have to use the alternative payroll. That's purely at your discretion. The next change that was put in place, really, if you remember the whole bottom half of the application, we were basically just pulling information from the previous pages that we filled out. And on the bottom portion of it there, you'll remember this potential forgiveness amounts. If you remember, we actually calculate 3 separate values. And in those 3 separate values, then whichever one was lower, that's the amount of your loan that would be forgiven. And the one change that they made there, line 10, simply said divide your total payroll costs, back up on line 1, divided by 0.6. The other change that they made was that, again, in the previous version, at least 75% of the funds had to be used for payroll costs. In the revised form, only 60% of your expenses had to go to payroll costs. You now can spend up to 40% on the utilities and rent and all the rest of that stuff. Now, here's the other caveat just to remember, right? The other thing is in the previous version, if you didn't spend at least 65% of your funds, 75% of your funds on payroll, then the amount that would be forgiven would be at a prorated basis. The way that the verbiage is currently still written, under this one, if you don't spend at least 60% on payroll expenses, then none of it would be forgiven. Now, having said that, both members of the House and the Senate have all said, nope, basically the intent was and that it would still be at a prorated basis, right? But they haven't passed anything yet to basically put that and make that official. So again, just at least be aware of that. Do yourself a favor, just stay above the 60%. You won't have an issue with it at that point in time. So that was really the changes to the first application. The second application that they released this week then is the Form 3508EZ. And as the name implies, it's really easy. It's essentially, it's 2 pages. This is the entire application. The second page is the signature page with all the initial all these items that you agree to. Again, remember, one of the items that you're agreeing to on there is that the information you're putting on these applications will agree with the information that you put on all your payroll information that you submit with your taxes at the end of the year. So again, make sure your reporting is clean so you don't run into any problems down the road. Now, let me just walk through this report. It's pretty quick. This, like I said, the full application applies to all of you. The easy will only apply to some of you, right? In order to use the easy form, you have to meet one of these 3 criteria. The first one is that you're self-employed and you have no employees, right? So at that point, you can use the easy form, right? So that's pretty simple. The second one is that you didn't reduce wages or salaries of any of your employees by more than 25%, and you did not reduce the number of hours that they worked, right? So your company was busy, you were crunching it all the way through, you maintained payroll, maintained hours throughout the entire thing. That would qualify you. You can use the easy application. The third criteria that was there is the borrower did not reduce your salary, right? So you didn't reduce salaries or wages of any of your people by more than 25%, and you experienced reductions in business activity as a result of health directives related to COVID-19. This really applies more toward restaurants, retail stores, places like that where they were shut down, and they're saying, okay, yeah, you can open back up now, but only at 25% of your capacity. Well, okay, that really doesn't apply too much to what most of us do, but that was the third. Now, again, you don't have to meet all 3. You only have to meet one of the 3 in order to use this particular form. So the application itself is really simple, right? The whole first half of it is exactly like what we covered in the full application form. There are no changes, no differences, all right? So we'll fill that out the same way. The bottom half of it Well, first off, there is the checkbox here. So if your loan amount was more than $2 million, you got to check that box. Remember the clarification on that you needed these funds, right? The SBA clarified that as long as you were lower than $2 million on your funding, that you would not be audited, right? So again, if you're more than $2 million, they're going to take a look at it. Second thing is, now when you start going through here, lines, quite frankly, lines 1 through, there are no tables, there's no worksheet A, this is it. Right, so line 1, what were your total payroll costs? Line 2, what was your business mortgage interest payments? Line 3, what was your business rent or your lease payments? Line 4, what were your utility payments? They're defined the exact same way they were in the other application. Then on this one, again, potential forgiveness amount, we've got lines 5, 6, and 7. We're going to make the same 3 calculations. And whichever one is lowest will be our forgiveness amount. So line 5 is simply saying we're going to tally up all these expenses. Line 6 says what was your total PPP amount, loan amount. And line 7 is take your total payroll costs divided by 0.6 to make sure that you're hitting at least 60% of your funds used for payroll. And whichever of those 3 are is lowest, that's your forgiveness amount on the application. That's it. So it's pretty simple. It's pretty easy to go through and use that piece of the puzzle. So utilize that tool if it makes sense for you. Now, what I've done is, again, the page that we've had out there and the number of you that have gone out there and downloaded some of the resources on this page is incredible. We appreciate that. Again, that's why they're there. But grandyassociates.com/untangle, right below this block, so right there, I put in new links. And so the links will give you a link to the new revised application, as well as the instructions for the full application form, and a link to the easy form application and its instructions. So both of those are there. If you've got some people within your company or you want to go back and just revisit that webinar that we did on defining all of this stuff for the payroll protection program, the forgiveness side of it, in just probably by tomorrow, I will have we're going to record that entire program over again, including all of these changes with this program, and we'll go ahead and put that out on this page as well. So you'll have the resources that are out there. There have been a tremendous number of you who have taken seriously that idea of leading through COVID-19 and beyond, because that's kind of a big deal. And so, again, that training program will help you to look at what are some of the things that you need to be doing in your company as you lead through. Our businesses will not go back to normal. And so we need to be looking at some of those changes that we need to be implementing in the company. And we had a tremendous response on the number of companies that were interested in the 2-day Planning for Profit workshop. We held that one early June. We had so much that we put another one on the schedule coming up here in late July. I think it's the 21st and 22nd of July. That one is out there. We can get information and register for that program out here as well. So all of those resources are out on that same page. With that, if there is any way or any additional questions that you have in regard to these, don't be afraid to reach out to us. Our team is ready and willing to help in any way that we can. And if you have again, just need the resources, remember that Untangle page that's out there. With that, have a great day. Stay safe.